All righty, well, thank you everybody for coming back from lunch here, joining us here. It's my pleasure to introduce our next two speakers, Mehul Sanghani and Michelle Foltz. Let me give you a little bit of background on both of them. Now, Michelle is a two-time graduate of Virginia Tech, and if I get it right, a cohort 2 graduate of the MSBA ABA program. She's a client leader for IBM's technology business, primarily supporting the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Now, Mehul Sanghani is the founder and CEO of Octo, a leading technology firm that he built from the ground up to serve the public sector with cutting-edge digital and artificial intelligence solutions. Under his leadership, Octo grew into one of the most respected government technology partners in the nation, recognized for its culture of innovation and integrity. I should note also that Mehul is a native of Blacksburg, Virginia, and he began his journey right here at Virginia Tech. 2 degrees from Virginia Tech, and his deep connection to the university continues today through his family's remarkable philanthropy, including the Sanghani Center for Artificial Intelligence and Data Analytics, and support to the Innovation Campus up in Northern Virginia. So please join me in welcoming Mehul and Michelle to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from lunch. I'm Michelle Foltz, a proud double Hokie and DHS client leader for IBM's technology business. It is an absolute privilege to host today's Fireside Chat with someone whose journey has inspired so many across Virginia Tech, as well as the federal community, Mehul Sanghani, founder and CEO of Octo, which is now an IBM company. Mehul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be in Blacksburg.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure as many of you know, Mehul is a big Virginia Tech football fan and supporter, so it only feels fitting that our fireside chat here today have a little bit of game day energy to it, some high spirit, teamwork, and...
I thought we were going to come out the Sandman, but I guess that's frowned upon here in the...
maybe next time. How about that?
Fireworks.
Yeah.
Or something.
Hopefully next time, right? But love to hear some lessons from the field as well. So with that, let's get started. So Mehul, let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
What was it like growing up here in Blacksburg, and how did that shape your path?
Yeah, a very interesting place to grow up. I think I'll start with the fact that my parents were immigrants. They immigrated here in 1979. I was 3 years old when my parents came here. Both of my parents had college degrees. My dad is a civil engineer, and my mom had a degree in economics. But, you know, typical immigrant story. I think when they came here, they struggled initially to find, you know, opportunities. My mom worked at McDonald's. My dad worked at 7-Eleven initially. They eventually landed opportunities that were closer to the field. My mom got a job in a shirt factory, and my dad got a job as an estimator in the civil engineering field. But after several years, they saw a new opportunity. Several folks in my mom's family had become entrepreneurs. They had borrowed money, scraped together some money, and bought very small mom and pop motels. And my parents, observing that and seeing, you know, them succeed, you know, on minor levels with building their own enterprise, you know, aspired to do the same. And so with $30,000 they had scraped together, along with $70,000 that they had borrowed from some other friends in the community, they bought a small motel here in Blacksburg, the Red Carpet Inn, that's located just down the street, still here.
Yes.
On South Main Street. But, you know, my parents were very nascent entrepreneurs. They bought the property in 1989, and you know, had, you know, a pretty steep learning curve, you know, building and operating a business. And, you know, most folks don't know, obviously they're familiar, most folks view the restaurant business as a difficult business and enterprise to operate, not only because of low margins, but, you know, you're working holidays, nights, weekends. In many ways, obviously I'm biased. I think the motel business is an even tougher enterprise to build. Obviously these aren't Four Seasons properties, these are mom and pop motels, and so in many cases, and much was the case with us, we were the arms and the legs of the enterprise. We were the ones that cleaned the rooms, we were the ones that folded laundry, we were the ones that greeted the guests. We lived in a small 2-bedroom, it was 4 of us, my sister and my parents, about 700, 900 square foot apartment, and my sister and I shared a room above the office. And so we were the operations. And initially, my parents really struggled with knowing and understanding how to operate an enterprise. We had moved from a much larger community into a community like Blacksburg that, even though it had the college town, was a much smaller community. So not just sort of integrating in here culturally, but figuring out how to run a business. And so they went through a lot of learning curves in doing that, and I learned a lot as well. I think the big thing for my parents is, as they learned and got lessons, in that entrepreneurship, almost a crash course, the business really struggled. And as the business struggled, they really had to resort to doing things like selling one of the cars that we had to sort of pay the electric bill and some of those things. And the one thing that changed the dynamic, really, of the business was not just their own entrepreneurial acumen that grew a little bit over time, but was the rise of the football program. In 1992, Frank Beamer, those are football fans, and this is the theme for me with football, had a year, after 3 years, he was 9-1, he finished that season. 1993, he had a run of success that led us to over 20 plus consecutive bowl games in a row. But prior to that was very tough times, and prior to that, for my parents' business, it was definitely a struggling operation. But coming back to the main theme here, I think the biggest things that I learned were humility. What it meant to run every element of a business. I cleaned my fair share of toilets. I folded my fair share of laundry, and I think those elements of not only understanding the ins and outs of the operations of a business, but being heavily involved at the grassroots level. Resiliency, was an important element that I learned, in my time here in Blacksburg, watching my parents operate that enterprise. But I also grew to love and respect this particular community. I think I noted that the success that my parents eventually had was tied to the success of the football program. I sold Cokes here in the stadium. It was about $40 a game I made, and when my parents didn't need help cleaning the rooms and stuff. And so, I saw that this community was a special place, and I saw the importance of community and building an enterprise too. So all of those things really came together to make Blacksburg a special place. And so, and again, I also had a chance to rub shoulders with a lot of kids whose parents were professors. And so seeing the impact of innovation and how it could shape not just society, but shape, industry through the research that their parents were supporting was extremely impactful for me too. And so it's a unique community in many ways, and I'm glad to call this place home.
Absolutely. Well, I want to learn a little bit more about those early entrepreneurial years for you. Tell me, what inspired you to take the leap of faith back in 2006 and start Octo?
Yeah, no, I think, I graduated. I was fortunate enough to go to school here at Virginia Tech after I graduated from Blacksburg High School. And I had the opportunity to spend a few years working in the Silicon Valley. So I graduated in 98, and I had a chance, really at the height of the dot-com boom, to work for a couple different companies that were experiencing explosive growth during the dot-com area. I worked for a company called PeopleSoft in Pleasanton, California, that runs still does run a lot of the major payroll and checks for everybody. It's what keeps people paid every 2 weeks, and is still the backbone for a lot of those systems. And then had a chance to leave there and go down the road to join a company that was just IPOing at the time, a company called Commerce One. And I think one of the things that I learned was that people were willing to work for places that sold a vision, and they were also willing to work and sacrifice and build something if they were part of a greater culture. And so, I thought it was unusual back then. I was certainly not. It became, sort of a cliched element of Silicon Valley culture if you watch movies and look at Google and Facebook. But back then, people were bringing their dogs to work, and I just thought that was unusual. I had sort of viewed work environments as being a place that were very buttoned down, ping pong tables and kegerators and in the break rooms. I saw the impact of these things that shaped, an ability to attract higher level talent, and I saw how hard these people worked as a result. And so I knew that when and if I had that opportunity, I wanted the opportunity to use culture as a differentiator. And so, I eventually moved to the DC area. I was dating a girl who's now my wife, also a Hokie, graduated here just a year behind me. And she had relocated to DC, and I relocated to DC to be closer to her, and we got engaged. And knowing that I didn't want to travel as much as I did for the software companies, I got involved in the industry that was there locally, and leveraging my IT background, I got involved in working at Booz Allen, which was a large-scale government contractor. I had no experience or exposure to the government contracting industry, and I spent 3 years there or 2 years there really learning the ins and outs of that industry, and then left to join a company called Gartner. That's a big IT research brand. The day I joined their consulting organization, and there again, I got exposed to people in the federal marketplace, CIOs, key decision makers, that were involved, and build a lot of connectivity and a Rolodex of relationships with them. Eventually, during my time at Gartner, I was approached by one of the clients that I was working with at Gartner, and they approached me and asked me if I had ever thought about starting my own thing. And obviously, with my parents having that entrepreneurial background, it was something that I did aspire to, but I was just 30 years old. And so I spent that weekend really thinking about the opportunity that was in front of me. And I went to my father, who obviously was very influential with me, having run the business here. And I asked him, what he thought. And he opened up the drawer in his desk and wrote me a check for $50,000 and said, "Son, I want you to do this, and I don't think you're ever going to look back." And so I went into it with eyes wide open. I went into it with the faith and the conviction of someone who I looked up to and who believed in me. And I went into it with the capital that I needed to really get off the ground. And so that was how I was able to start Octo, was really that journey that shaped really a lot of what I wanted to have. It was the opportunity to be here in Blacksburg and know and understand what it took to be an entrepreneur and take those risks and to maybe lose it all. I had the opportunity to be in the Silicon Valley and see the importance of culture and how culture could be a differentiator in attracting top-rate talent. And then I had the right mix of serendipity. I had the opportunity that was put in front of me by a customer who believed in me, and then the backing of my father who wrote me the check. And so all of these things came together with again, I use the word serendipity, but also, preparation and opportunity coming together to create some luck for me. And so with that that's really how Octo started.
Awesome. Fantastic. And you mentioned Silicon Valley and the importance of culture.
Yeah.
I want to dive in a little bit deeper there.
Yeah.
I hear Octo's culture is legendary. It's been described as authentic, people first, and even a no jerks culture.
Yeah.
So how did you intentionally build that environment for Octo?
Yeah, well, if anybody's here in the audience, Jeff Cook is here. He's my CFO. Certainly you can ask him about the culture. But, I probably took, my time in the Silicon Valley initially when I built the company. Probably I took that to heart too much, when I built the company. And, I built Octo to really I built it with a why in mind, and the why, it wasn't, the how we're going to do it or what we were going to do. It was the why in mind that we had was we wanted to solve the government's most complex problems, but solve them with bleeding edge IT. And so, with that sort of conviction in mind, that's what we did. And that allowed us to sort of permeate out with more conviction in a very, very crowded marketplace. There are over 30,000 contractors in the federal DC area. And very little barriers to entry. I mean, anyone in the audience, if they want to, there's a little bit of a paper tiger in terms of filling out the paperwork, but anyone can create their own company and hang their own shingle. And so, differentiation is challenging in a fragmented market like that. And so we began with, okay, what are we trying to build? Why are we trying to build it? And, it was with that conviction that we really, created, and moved things out from there. And so, from a cultural perspective, you asked about that. In the early years, we were able to attract people by really, permeating a little bit of the Silicon Valley culture and bringing that to what we were doing at Octo. We did lots of creative things. I mean, one of the more noteworthy things that we became known for was that we would have an annual offsite meeting. We would take everybody in the company to Las Vegas. And so, like I said, we eventually had to grow out of that, but it was amazing in terms of creating the culture. We, certainly had, during the day, we would spend a lot of time and energy allowing folks in a very nascent startup type culture. We had like 40, 50, and at its peak, maybe about 100 employees that participated in this. And it allowed us to sort of, build this culture around folks that wanted to do these high-end things and had bleeding edge skill sets, but wanted to be part of a different culture where it wasn't just badge switching. In our industry, in the government contracting space, is known for badge switching as contracts flip, people flip. And we wanted folks to have the opportunity to build a career. And we spent a lot of time and energy in selling this notion of building a career with us, investing in them, and doing it at a unique culture. And so these offsites that we had were one particular platform for us to really put an imprint on our culture. We spent a lot of time and energy during the day for folks to cross-collaborate and share what they were doing on each one of their individual projects, so they didn't feel like they were just wedded to the seat that they were filling on the contract that they were supporting. They had a chance to collaborate with other folks. We invested a lot in continuing education. These are folks that had high-end talent. They could have gone to work anywhere, and we spent a lot of time and energy investing in what it would take for them to continue to keep their tools sharp. And so most folks in the marketplace would offer, very low, maybe $700 in tuition reimbursement. We offered, $3,000 to $5,000 to each individual employee, and encouraged people to spend it, because the more highly skilled they were, the more valuable they were to us, even if it meant that they left the company. And so these were tenets, and certainly having an environment like that in Las Vegas, we had an opportunity to have a little bit of fun too, and really cement elements of our culture and really try and really extend this element of it being the type of place where you could not only build your career, but be around like-minded folks, and also, perhaps be in a fun environment too, because I saw the impact of that in the Silicon Valley culture. But you mentioned no jerks. It's actually, we have enough adults in the room. It's actually no assholes is what we said, so I'll just say that. And we were very colorful in how we articulated that, and we wanted to be direct and upfront. And, that came from, something I had watched a speech someone had given, and they talked about working, this gentleman was a consultant, and he had worked with the Navy SEALs, one of the most high-performing organizations in the world. And when the SEALs looked at who they wanted to work with and how they chose members of the team, they really described it in terms of a matrix. They had folks that were on the y-axis that were highly competent, and on the x-axis who was highly trustworthy. And, they mapped things out. And of course, and the way they described it is, who do you trust with your life? And then who do you trust with your wife and your money? Okay. On the x-axis. And these are SEALs after all. But look, I think what he described was that everybody, of course, wants the individuals that are both high-performing and high-trustworthy. That goes without saying. And of course, nobody wants the people that are low in competence and low in trust.
Sure.
But where the organization fails, and what they really spend a lot of time weeding out, are naturally folks that are high-performing but low trust. These are the enemy of any organization. And so even if it means taking someone that is of low competence and high trust, or medium competence and high trust, they value and relish those individuals more than others. And I thought it was noteworthy that, like, when I worked in any organization, if you were to go to people in that organization, everyone could tell you, if you asked them who the asshole was in that organization or that team, they could tell you right away. Right away, they could say, this is the individual that is making it challenging for us to achieve progress. But also, they could also tell you who the most trustworthy individual was on that team. And so that had an impact for me, and we really, had this concept of no jerks, but it was built off of, what was influential to me, and seeing how that applied to, one of the most high-performing organizations in the world, and the Navy SEALs, and what they put a premium on. And what they put a premium on was trustworthiness based on consistency over, even in many ways, competence. And so that was important for us as we built our culture to really ensure from the top down that we put a premium on that.
Fantastic. Well, let's fast forward to today. The pace of innovation has never been quicker. How do you see AI reshaping both government and industry over the next 5 years?
Yeah, no, I think that's obviously the question du jour of today. I'm very fortunate to have several years ago, due to some of the success that we've had, my wife and I endowed the School for Artificial Intelligence here at Virginia Tech, the Sanghani Center for Artificial Intelligence. And I think at the time, certainly, we endowed it back in, I think, 2018. And, back then, I think I certainly saw the potential for AI to have an impact on our society, so to speak. But I certainly didn't expect it to be the monster that it is today in terms of it being in the lexicon of almost everything in every industry, that we have, and then certainly being a part of something that needs to be invested in as part of the national security apparatus. So for me individually, I certainly I've been an early believer in the impact of artificial intelligence, and I certainly, saw that impact during our time at Okta. One of the things that we were able to do, as I noted, we have become known for, building next generation technology. And we, despite that sort of preeminence that we had in that area, we knew that we needed, and the metaphor that we use is a sports one, not surprisingly, is that, there's a famous hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, and what made him great is that he didn't just skate to where the puck is and skate to that area. He knew where the puck was going, and he skated to that area. And we use that metaphorically to describe where we wanted to be as a company. We wanted to be in areas, if we were going to be known, if our why was to be known for solving complex problems, we needed to think ahead about where the government was going to be solving complex problems. And it wasn't just the technologies that we were supporting today. It was going to be next generation technologies like artificial intelligence. And so, we were able to make a 10-figure investment in a lab environment that we called O-Labs, that had some of the first NVIDIA machines and was the largest AI lab of its kind, for the federal government. It was a big reason that IBM, thank you, by the way, IBM acquired us. Michelle works at IBM, obviously. But, I think again, we saw that impact during the time that we were building Okta. Obviously, IBM saw the opportunity to inherit some of the things that we had done, including that lab that we had invested in, and to continue to extend it. And so, I think folks talk about AI and its ability to impact and shape society, but I think the real impact for AI is going to be in solving specific missions. I mentioned that, one of the things that was our why was, the fact that we wanted to solve complex problems for the government. And I think we need to look at AI as not just a technology, but an enabler of solving some of society's most complex problems, whether that's in biotech, whether that's in defense tech. And so for me personally, where I have, really looked to do things, obviously now with the Sanghani Center, and I have a little bit more time on my hands to work with them, is really looking at ways that, Virginia Tech, the Sanghani Center, and overall, we can leverage AI to solve some of the same problems that I was taking on in the federal government domain, whether that's, complex supply chain problems for the F-35, public health problems like the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, whether that's analyzing reams of data for our intelligence community, or, things as complex as how we have, autonomous operations in drones and battle rhythms associated with autonomous weapon systems. These are all things that impact the national security domain, and that's where a lot of my energy and focus is. And so both with the Sanghani Center and then, in the next few months, I'm launching something called Gray Core Ventures, which is an extension of my family office to invest in bleeding edge AI that attacks defense tech and the national security domains. I certainly am a believer in that. But I think I speak about it from my perspective to answer your question. Again, I think, where AI has the ability to extend, and I think right now, if you look at it in the investor space, I think I saw a stat today that said the Magnificent Seven, which is referring to the 7 largest companies, now represent 35% of the S&P 500, which is, a significant amount of concentration. And so I think right now, and really from 1985 heretofore, we've been a part of the computing revolution, and if you look at where a lot of the money is in the public markets, it's on the folks still providing the data centers, the software, and the tools to enable AI. But I think going forward, there's going to be opportunity in the actual missions that are impacted by AI. And so for me as an investor, I'm looking at defense tech, but I think, looking out, I think I see insane opportunity, and I'll continue to look for it as an investor in the areas of biotechnology and how it can impact longevity and other things, and how it can impact, pharmaceuticals, and how it can impact right now we have the ability to sequence our genomes. Can that impact how we approach, people's proclivity to certain diseases? And so, to me, AI's biggest impact will be in how it impacts those outcomes as much as it will be, I think the narrative today is around the technologies themselves.
Fantastic. Well, looking forward to hearing more about that and seeing where AI goes over these next few years. Now shifting from tech to Virginia Tech, you've stayed very close to Virginia Tech, from tailgates to speaking at commencement last year, and even surprising some graduates with a free slice of Benny's Pizza from Uncle Mehul. How has being a Hokie influenced your leadership style and values?
Yeah, well, I spent some time already talking about, my time growing up here in Blacksburg and how that impacted me being around this community, and how it impacted me being around some of the professors and some of my friends growing up whose parents were professors, how that, had a profound impact on me. But, I like to say that there's nothing, everything good in my life I can trace back to my time here in Blacksburg. I obviously spent some time talking about, my time here with my parents as entrepreneurs, and that being, a big part of my upbringing. I went to school here. Obviously, I have an affinity for the school and the program and my education here. I met my wife here. So, again, even, my love for football, my affinity for football is probably, I don't play golf. My only real hobby is my passion for Virginia Tech football, I think. And so everything that is associated with that, I can trace back. Even my children, I tell them, if I had met your mom, who knows, right? So, I met her during my time here. So, this is, a special place. And it was very easy for me when I had the means to sort of look back at ways that I could give back on, this community. And one of the more impactful things for me growing up was the fact that I was able to walk around the drill field sometimes, especially, during Thanksgiving break or Christmas break, when it was almost a ghost town. You see tumbleweed almost blowing through the drill field. It's always windy there. And, I would walk around campus sometimes with my dad, and my dad would walk into a building like Pamplin. And he would be like, what school is here? And I'd be like, Dad, this is the business school. And he'd look at the plaque, and it said, Pamplin. And he was like, who's Robert B. Pamplin, and what is his legacy? And it would be on the plaque, but I had actually, given I knew my dad's affinity, I knew a little bit. But I think one of the things that struck me and was impactful for me is that my dad would always comment that, how amazing is it for this family's legacy to not only be associated with something like a college that has the ability to impact the future and generations to come, but for this family to be associated with its legacy and see this plaque here and have that sense of pride. And so, that really motivated me, not just the legacy from a vanity perspective, but being able to give back to an institution that was, obviously impactful for me, but being able to do things in a way that impacted things far beyond any of the elements associated with having my name associated with the school. That resonated with me. And I mentioned the story about my dad writing that check. He passed away a year after writing me that check. So we never really saw some of the success that we had with Octo. And so when I had the opportunity, I wanted to give back. And, I mentioned that that experience of walking the campus and seeing, how much it meant to my dad. When I had the opportunity to do things, I really wanted to do it here at Virginia Tech. And so I really focused on three things that, aligned with some of the things that were impactful for me growing up. One was I've already talked about, which is the Sanghani Center for Artificial Intelligence. I saw the ability to really create something that was a center, not just associated with engineering or business, but it's a center. So that really means it's cross-cutting, to be able to look at people that have an interest in AI from an engineering perspective or a business perspective, but also if you're a science major or a biology major, you could also be a part of this center and be attached to research that has the ability to shape society, like I talked about before. The second thing that we did was, I mentioned my roots here in this community, and so, I wanted to invest in something that could have an impact. And one of the things that my wife and I saw on TV was we watched a Good Morning America segment that had the country singer Brad Paisley and his wife, the actress Kimberly Williams, who was in Father of the Bride, if people know who she is. She's a famous actress too. And they had really partnered with Belmont University to create a food pantry that serviced the community at large. And they did so in partnership with the university because the university has the ability to reach their tentacles into all areas of the community that has impact and need. And so I approached the university about creating the very same food pantry, and the university came back to me and said, Mehul, we actually just did a study on this, and upwards, close to 1 in 3 college students at some point during their college career, especially at the graduate student level, are impacted by food insecurity. And so, we think that this is a great concept, but why don't we look at beginning, this concept and doing it with something that's centered around the university and its impact on food insecurity amongst the student community. And so we were able to create the Market at Virginia Tech, which is, a food pantry catered towards students, both undergrad and graduate students. We produce there are about 1,500 students that are currently in the program. It's a transient program, and it allows students that might be experiencing food insecurity for varying reasons to have access to food and get them through that environment. One of the more impactful things, just to share it, was I had a student reach out to me that was a part of this, and she was, her parents had passed away. She was working as both an Amazon driver and a waitress and putting herself through school here. She tore her Achilles working at the Amazon delivery service and had no ability. She was on a scholarship here, but had no ability to feed herself because she had lost the 2 jobs that she was using to provide those means. And she talked to me about how impactful the year that she spent here affiliated with the Market and having that supplement, how important that was for her and her sister, who she was also supporting while going to school here. And so, that was something that was amazing for us to do, and something that I'm very fortunate that the university has allowed us to forge a partnership with. So it was the AI Center in the Market. And then, on a more fun level, I mentioned my affinity for Virginia Tech football. I've been a huge football fan for a lot of different reasons. And we had the opportunity, I should say, to create the Players Lounge here that is designed towards hosting not only existing football players, but recruits, and creates the opportunity for them to have an environment for them to hang out and build community, for each other. So, those are kind of the 3 areas, but, football, the community, and then the AI Center. I had a chance to give gifts that had impacts into all those areas. And the last thing I'll mention, because you mentioned it, isn't really a gift, but I obviously my parents sold their motel. It's still there, but it's operated. It continues to be operated by other folks on a mom and pop basis. But obviously, have an affinity for any of the businesses here in the community, and I found out about the Benny's Pizza guys, because I would be at Benny's Pizza sometimes when I was here for a night game, and I would get the late night pizza, and I would see the kids, and I was obviously a fan of the product, and they were kind enough to reach out to me. We reached out to each other, and they let me invest in their enterprise. That isn't philanthropy, but I had a chance to invest, and it's been amazing, obviously, to be associated with something that I think has a chance to be a landmark here in the community. And then their values are very much aligned with us. They've been very supportive of the Market and other things at Virginia Tech, continue to provide stuff for the football program and other things as well. So.
Well, before we open it up for a few questions from our audience, I would love to end this portion on a more personal note. What advice do you believe your first mentor and late cousin, Sunit Gupta, would want you to share with our audience here today?
Yeah, no, so just to lead into it, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of folks that had an impact on me. I mentioned, my father had a huge impact on me. I'll share that, when I was in school here studying engineering, I wanted to drop out several times. I was not doing well in a couple of the engineering classes, and my dad would not, the typical, I think, South Asian parent, said that if I didn't want to study engineering, that I would have to come work at the motel with him. And so, of course, that changed my mind. He put it more colorfully than that, sure. But I'll spare the audience some of that since I already dropped the A-bomb earlier. But either way, I think he, had an insane impact on me. And then when I first started my government contracting business, I had a chance to really learn from, Suneet Gupta, who was my cousin, but by marriage. So he's married to my cousin and was really influential with me, like a big brother to me, and helped me, shape my view on, the opportunities that I had and how I would build a company. He was fortunate to have a GovCon company that was about $40 million a year in size, and so he had a lot of lessons learned. But probably the most important lesson that he shared with me is, that, and he had a saying, and he said that you don't need a safety net if you can use conviction as your parachute. And so that really had a profound impact on me in terms of how I viewed risk and the opportunities that were in front of me, and how he really helped build my confidence in, my ability to take on the risk, my ability to be successful. The conversations I had with my father about, never looking back, and the things that I learned. I think, growing up here in Blacksburg, I'm not ashamed to admit that, I resented, being a part of that motel because, the phone's ringing all into the night. I didn't have the opportunity to have a normal teenage upbringing like some of my friends that didn't have to clean rooms or fold laundry. But, in hindsight now, that experience, as I've shared, built a tremendous amount of conviction, as Suneet would put it, in my ability to be an entrepreneur, not only to take on the risk, but to have the entrepreneurial instincts, and resiliency to be successful. And, and so I think that would be the lesson or the advice I would give to others. That was the advice that I was given and shaped and melded me in many ways, that, you don't need a safety net if conviction is your parachute.
Some great advice. Well, thank you so much, Mehul. I'm sure our audience has a few questions that they are eager to ask. So let's take a couple from the room. We have a microphone in the middle here. If you have a question for Mehul, please stand and ask him your question. It's okay. You don't have to run to the mic. We'll be able to hear you in a moment.
Hey, Mehul, I wanted to thank you for coming to town today. As a fellow Blacksburg resident, it means a lot that you took your time out of your schedule to come and share with us today. So
Any excuse to come back to Blacksburg, I'm in.
Absolutely. So my question is, as we look at AI, and one of our earlier speakers mentioned that one internet search using AI uses about 10 times as much electricity as an equivalent traditional computing search, and then the prevalence of data centers and some of the ecosystem negative impacts from data centers, which I'm sure you're familiar with, having lived up in that area for so long.
Yeah.
So my question is, what do you see as ways to build kind of equilibriums with that sustainability side, and what do you see as the responsibility of AI-based firms to the environment, and to what direction at the macro level would you see the world and the AI firms working in on the sustainability side?
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer. That's a great question. I'm a big believer in responsible AI, both from an ethics and guardrails perspective. That's a big component of the Northern Virginia campus. You're going to see Rishi JT on the stage with me later, and he's going to talk about that, and that being a big part of education going forward, and ensuring that we have the next generation of technology understand that responsibility from a guardrail perspective. But from an environmental perspective, I think, there's really two elements to that, right? One is, the political element. And I think what we haven't seen enough of is that in order to solve this problem, you cannot have big tech, and I talked about the Magnificent Seven earlier. You can't have big tech dictate that to communities. You have to have communities partner with big tech to solve this problem. And I think Northern Virginia is a great example of that. I think about a third of all internet traffic flows through Northern Virginia, and that makes it a ripe community for them to build some of these supercomputing centers, and that represents an opportunity for the Commonwealth, but also represents a challenge, because those communities and the power that's required, as you pointed out, involve significant partnership. So one is, I think there needs to be more. On the political side, there needs to be more regulation and policy that forces the partnership, that things cannot just take place without that partnership with the community to enable things. Now, I understand that when you bring that up, there's two elements to it. It's a double-edged sword because you want to have progress, and progress and bureaucracy and policymaking don't necessarily go hand in hand. We're in a government shutdown right now. But I think you have to force some level, you have to sort of grease and encourage that level and through policy mandate that level of partnership. The second piece is, okay, what are the alternatives, to the energy consumption issue that you see out there? And I think there are a number of different promising, startups. Rick Perry, who's the former governor of Texas, has a startup that just IPO'd that is looking at safe ways of leveraging nuclear technology to attack some of the energy consumption problems that we have. And so I think you have to look at other creative means of addressing the energy requirements that are required. But, that also, again, involves some level of partnership and symbiosis with the community. And so, I won't, I am skinny on understanding all the different alternatives, but I just know that there's a lot of investment going now. And that's one of the things that, despite all this talk about China and what they're, them being a prominent geopolitical adversary and or, competitor, I think if you were to start a company anywhere in the world, you would start it here in the United States. And there's reason for that, right? We have great access to capital. We have great access to human capital in addition to that. And then, we have a regulatory environment that really fosters creativity and innovation. And that's a little bit more challenging in other geographies. And I think that is our sort of superpower to be able to address some of the energy problems that you bring up, is that we are already seeding, once we have a problem that needs to be addressed, we're already seeding innovative companies that can tackle some of those problems too.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Hello, thank you for coming here today. With AI and data reshaping every industry, leadership is evolving rapidly. From your perspective, what core leadership qualities will define leaders over next decade, and how can we, as a student, begin developing those qualities today?
Yeah, again, I think I don't want to preempt too much the panel we have at 3:45, but I will plug it. But that's a big topic going forward. But if I were to kind of encapsulate, leadership qualities that are going to be important going forward, obviously competency, that goes without saying. That's why you're here. That's why you're in college, to really address the skills that you need to be competent in the workforce of tomorrow, whatever that may be. But then I'll throw out the other things that I think as an employer are soft skills that are equally important. I talked about trust earlier. Trust is important. So how do you build, this skill of fostering trust and creating trust? And that is something that is harder to attack from a continuing education perspective. And I think there are some ideas now even floating here at Virginia Tech on treating, and ensuring that we have that skill set. I won't belabor that one because I think that's something I talked about earlier when I talked about the trust and competency dynamic and how important that is in any work environment. But I think if I were to just, as a student, the way you build trust is by being consistent, right? And so if you're consistent, and my entry-level hires, the ones that were the most consistent and reliable, those are the ones that we trusted. Those are the ones that we elevated. Those are the ones that we looked at creative ways to retain. And those are the ones that we gave opportunities to early. So that there's the trust element. I talked about competency. But the other one is communication, right? So you're going to get lots of things here that build on your competency, as I talked about. But look for ways that you can build and extend your ability to communicate. And in any environment, I think the fairly or unfairly, the folks that have both competent skill sets and the ability to articulate and communicate are the ones that in my view, move up in their careers the fastest and have the most opportunity in some of those things. And so, look for ways here in your time at Virginia Tech. There's no shortage of, opportunities to hone your ability to communicate and do so in ways that build on extending your competence, whether that's writing papers or speaking at forums, et cetera. The last one is, again, similar to trust, is probably more difficult to put your finger on, and that's empathy, right? I think that, like, from a leadership perspective, as your question was about leadership going forward, you know, leaders that have the ability to exude empathy, you know, were the ones that were a part of my leadership team. You know, ones that not only were empathetic to, you know, when you say that word, you think of, you know, empathy and understanding and meeting your employees where they are, but also your ability to be able to communicate that to our customer base too. As you know, as I mentioned right now, we're in the middle of a government shutdown. So being able to work through and understand what our clients were going through and meeting them where they were relative to, you know, their challenges allowed us, if you combine it with competency and the ability to communicate, allowed us to cross the trust chasm. And why did we get opportunities that larger companies like Accenture or Booz Allen or IBM before they acquired us, why were we given those opportunities is because, you know, it wasn't necessarily about the team size, it was our ability to build that trust, to be able to communicate, be able to empathize, but also our ability to deliver outcomes at a speed and a velocity that those people couldn't despite their size. So empathy is another one that I would really foot stomp.
Any final question from the audience? Yes.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah, of course.
What is one of your greatest failures, and where did you draw motivation to continue pursuing success the way you have despite that failure? Yeah,
so again, this is obviously I had no shortage of failures. I started the company at 30, and even though I had, you know, some level of confidence and conviction around what I do, and I made no shortage of mistakes. And the area where I would say that I made mistakes is, I think, by moving so quickly, I didn't have the opportunity always to ensure proper alignment with the why. I mentioned that we were looking to solve, you know, the most complex problems in the government with bleeding edge IT. And when we were growing the company, I won't mention the name of the agency, we won our largest contract to date with an agency that supported foreign missions. And, you know, we went into that with eyes wide open. We beat out a long-term incumbent. It was a $17 million contract for us, larger than any contract we had ever won. But as we got in there, we quickly found out that this customer was not only unethical, but also had a different view on what they wanted us to do. I mean, when I say that, you know, we typically work on projects that are solving problems and focused on outcomes, that was our why, and that's what we typically align to. This particular customer had all of our people on site, and I'm not kidding when I would tell you he would send me emails sometimes saying, so-and-so was in the bathroom for 34 minutes, and I hope you're not billing me for that time. And so the mistake we made was aligning to a customer whose why was so, you know, asymmetrically different, so misaligned with our why. And in our sort of thirst for growth, we took on that client. And so it took a lot of conviction on our part, and it's the only client I could say that we've sort of fired. We didn't go after the recompete, and we actually left that particular contract. And so what I would say is that, again, like, lean on, don't allow your thirst for growth to allow you to have missteps around what the purpose of your organization is. Because your consistency in aligning with that conviction is what allowed you to be credible and earn the trust of your employees. And I had a toxic environment at that particular customer in that particular contract, and we had a decision to make on whether to divorce what was our largest contract at the time. And we, you know, again, it wasn't without some consternation and some hand-wringing on our part, but we eventually decided to part ways with that customer. So that would be one of the things, lessons learned, I would say. That would be one of the failures I had, and that would be one of the lessons learned I had from that failure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any final question? Okay. Well, Mehul, thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights and journey with us today. And thank you, audience, for your very thoughtful questions. Please join me in giving Mehul a warm round of applause.
Thank you.